Part 1. The Fall from Grace. The penthouse was too quiet. Lucas Kane stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan tower, watching the first snow of December dust the city below. His reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, hollow cheeks, shadows under his eyes, the scar above his brow more pronounced without its usual cover of foundation for morning CNBC appearances. Behind him, the muted television flickered with his own face under the chyron. Kane Innovations. Collapse, billions vanish in hostile takeover. A crystal tumbler dangled from his fingers, the ice long melted. He didn't drink anymore, not since the doctors found the lesion on his liver last year. Ironic, he thought. Survive 3 heart attacks, only to be taken out by spreadsheet warriors and a bad biopsy. The elevator pinged. Victoria swept in, her Valentino heels clicking against the marble like gunshots. She didn't look at him, didn't look at the wreckage of half-packed boxes, the lawyers huddled in the corner whispering over tablets. She went straight to the bar and poured herself a martini, extra olives, no vermouth, the way she'd taken them since their honeymoon in Monaco. So, she finally turned, leaning against the counter with practiced casualness. We're poor now? Lucas watched a snowflake dissolve against the glass. The holding company is intact. The trusts. She snorted. You mean the ones your vulture brother trustees locked up tighter than a prenup? Across the room, their daughter Zoe gasped dramatically from her sprawl on the Chesterfield. Oh my God, does this mean no Maldives trip? Her phone was already out, thumbs flying. I told everyone we were doing NYE at the underwater villa. Zoe. Lucas didn't raise his voice. He never had to. She froze mid-swipe, her perfect glossed lips parting. For a second, she looked 12 again, right before she'd asked for a pony and gotten blockchain stock instead. Then the moment broke. She rolled her eyes. Whatever. Jax's family has a yacht in Antibes. The only one who didn't speak was Ethan. Lucas's son stood by the bookcase, running a finger along the spine of The Art of War, the first edition Lucas had bought at auction after his IPO. Ethan had his mother's coloring, dark hair, olive skin, but Lucas's own calculating stillness. Now those sharp green eyes tracked every twitch in the room like a chessboard. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. Mr. Kane, the bankruptcy filings require— I know what they require. Lucas set down his glass. Victoria, a word. She followed him onto the terrace without protest. The wind bit through his Tom Brown suit, but he welcomed the pain. It was real, tangible, unlike the numbers on those subpoenaed balance sheets. Victoria lit a cigarette, the flame trembling slightly in the breeze. How bad? They took everything. The admission tasted like ash. Marcus used the Singapore shell companies to— I don't care about the how. She blew smoke sideways away from him, always so considerate with her vices. What's left? The Detroit property. Her laugh was razor-wire sharp. That rat hole? It's off-grid, no liens. He watched her profile, the way her jaw tightened when she was thinking 3 moves ahead. We'll regroup there. We. She turned fully now, her gaze raking over him like a cat assessing a wounded bird. You really think I'm following you into exile? The snow fell harder, catching in her hair like diamonds. For 17 years, he'd loved this woman. For 17 years, he'd never once seen her blink first. The prenup holds, he said quietly. You walk now, you get nothing later. She took a long drag. Marcus offered me the guest house. Marcus, his former CFO, his best friend, the architect of this ruin. Lucas didn't react. He'd known since the first subpoena, since the night he'd found the encrypted files on Victoria's tablet. The guest house, he repeated. She shrugged. It has a spa. Behind them, the terrace door slid open. Ethan stood there, his school blazer buttoned wrong, his hair still sleep-tousled from the flight back from Choate. Dad. He held out a phone. It's Michael. Lucas took it. His oldest friend's voice crackled through. "They're moving on the Swiss accounts at dawn. Do we activate it?" Across the terrace, Victoria stubbed out her cigarette, her eyes already scanning Zillow on her phone. Lucas exhaled. "Activate Protocol Phoenix." He hung up before Michael could reply. Ethan was still watching him. "What's Protocol Phoenix?" Victoria snorted. "Another one of your father's paranoid fantasies." Lucas met his son's gaze. "Insurance." Inside, Zoe shrieked at something on TikTok. The lawyers murmured over clauses. The snow kept falling, burying the city below. And Lucas Kane, the man who'd built an empire on seeing around corners, finally let himself smile. Part 2. Life in the Shadows. The apartment smelled like mildew and defeat. Luke now, stood in the doorway of their new home, watching a roach scuttle across the warped linoleum. Behind him, Zoe gagged dramatically, pressing her designer sleeve to her nose. "Tell me this is a joke." Victoria's voice was dangerously calm. She stepped inside, her Louboutins sticking slightly to the floor. "Tell me you're filming some prank show." Luke set down their 2 suitcases, the only luggage they'd been allowed to take. Everything else had been seized. 3 bedrooms, he said, forcing optimism into his voice. "And look, the kitchen's—" "The kitchen?" Victoria yanked open a cabinet. A mouse darted out, brushing against her ankle. Her scream could have shattered glass. Zoe burst into tears. "I can't live here. I won't." She collapsed onto the stained mattress left by the previous tenants, her sobs muffled by the threadbare comforter. Only Ethan moved with purpose. He found a broom in the closet and began sweeping broken beer bottles into a pile. His jaw was set, his movements methodical. Luke watched him for a moment. This quiet son who asked so little, understood so much, before joining in. They worked in silence, nailing plywood over broken windows, scrubbing decades of grime from the bathroom. Victoria stood frozen in the center of the living room, her arms crossed, as if touching anything might make this nightmare more real. When Ethan produced a roll of duct tape to patch a hole in the wall, Luke caught his eye. "Where'd you learn that?" Ethan shrugged. "YouTube." Luke's chest tightened. His son had never fixed anything in his life. Their Manhattan penthouse had a full maintenance staff. The grocery store was an education in humiliation. Luke stared at the price tag on a gallon of milk, $4.29. He'd spent more on bottled water, but now with only $387 left in cash, every cent mattered. "Generic brands $1 cheaper." Luke turned. Ethan held up a jug with a faded label. "Right." Luke swapped them, ignoring the heat in his cheeks. At the checkout, Victoria materialized beside him, her perfume cutting through the stench of bleach and stale bread. She leaned toward the cashier, a pimpled teenager with a nose ring, and smiled, the same smile she'd used on senators at charity galas. "Darling," she purred, "would there be any discounts for new residents?" The kid blinked. Coupons are online?" Victoria's smile didn't waver. She lowered her voice. "I was thinking more of a personal welcome." Her manicured finger traced the boy's wrist. Luke's stomach turned. He grabbed the milk and pulled her away. "Stop!" Victoria wrenched free. "Someone has to pay for your failure." That night, Luke lay awake on a lumpy couch, listening to the symphony of sirens and shouting outside. A shadow moved in the dark. Ethan sat on the floor beside him. "You're not sleeping." "Neither are you." Ethan picked at a loose thread in the carpet. "Zoe's on the phone with Jax. Says she's moving in with him next week." Luke closed his eyes. Jax Vanderwalt, trust fund brat, notorious party boy. "She's 17. She says you can't stop her." The truth of it settled like a stone in Luke's gut. Without money, without status, what authority did he have? Ethan hesitated. "Mom's been texting someone. She thinks I don't see." Luke didn't ask who. He knew. A car alarm wailed outside. Ethan flinched, a tiny movement, but Luke caught it. His son, who'd faced down paparazzi and shareholder meetings without blinking, startled by a Detroit backfire. Luke reached out, squeezing Ethan's shoulder. "We'll be okay." Ethan met his gaze. "Protocol Phoenix?" Luke smiled faintly. "Get some sleep." The cracks showed in daylight. Luke caught himself reaching for a Rolex that wasn't there. He automatically corrected the pharmacist's Latin pronunciation of Adderall before remembering he was supposed to be a high school dropout named Luke. At the laundromat, Zoe sat cross-legged on a folding table, filming a TikTok. "Ah, broken fabulous," she narrated, panning to their spinning clothes. "When daddy loses his billions but you still got cheekbones. Zoe." Luke's voice cut through the humid air. She rolled her eyes but pocketed the phone. "Relax, it's just content." A man in a cheap suit sidled up to her. "You got star quality, kid." He slid a card across the table. "Black Lotus Entertainment. We're always scouting fresh faces." Luke moved before he thought, stepping between them. "She's not interested." The man smirked. "Let the lady decide." Zoe peered around Luke, already reaching for the card. "What kind of modeling?" Luke snatched it first. The address was a warehouse in Vegas. The CEO photo was a stock image. He burned it in the laundromat sink, watching the flames reflect in Zoe's furious eyes. "We stick together," he growled. That night, while Victoria and Zoe slept, Luke spread blueprints across the kitchen table. Kane Tower, server room B7, glowed under his flashlight. A shadow fell across the paper. Ethan stood there holding 2 mugs of instant coffee. "You're going back." It wasn't a question. Luke met his son's gaze. "We never left." Part 3. Cracks in the Mask. The walls were too thin. Ethan woke to the sound of hushed, venomous whispers through the particle board separating his bedroom from his parents'. He lay perfectly still, barely breathing as the argument slithered through the cracks. "Marcus said the papers are ready by Thursday." His mother's voice sharp as broken glass. "You're really doing this now?" His father, no, Luke's, response was dangerously calm. "He offered me the guest house, Lucas. The guest house, with staff, with a spa." "And what price tag did he put on that?" A pause, then his mother's laugh, cold and humorless. "Higher than yours, apparently." Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. Outside, a car backfired, drowning out whatever came next. When he opened them again, Dawn's gray fingers were creeping through the plywood-covered window. Breakfast was a silent war zone. Zoe scrolled through her phone, pausing occasionally to smirk at some message. Their mother picked at a bowl of off-brand cereal like it might contain arsenic. Ethan watched his father, Luke, he had to remember to call him Luke, methodically chewing toast that tasted like sawdust. "I got scouted," Zoe announced suddenly. The spoon slipped from Victoria's fingers with a clatter. "What?" Zoe flipped her hair over one shoulder. "Black Lotus Entertainment. They want me for test shots in Vegas." She slid a business card across the table. Ethan saw it first. The embossed lotus flower, the Gmail address, the Vegas warehouse district address. His stomach turned. Luke didn't even look up from his coffee. "No!" Zoe's face twisted. "You don't get to say no anymore. Do you even know what their standard rate is for—" Luke moved faster than Ethan had ever seen. 1 second the card was on the table, the next it was in the sink, engulfed in blue flame from the gas stove. Victoria gasped. Zoe screamed. "We stick together," Luke growled, the fire reflecting in his eyes. Zoe stood so fast her chair toppled. "Fuck you! You ruined everything!" She stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Victoria rose more slowly, her movements precise. "You can't control her forever." Luke met her gaze. Neither can Marcus. Something unspoken passed between them. Victoria paled slightly, then followed Zoe out. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan cleared his throat. "I can find a job. At a garage, maybe. I know cars." Luke's expression softened. You focus on school. What's the point? Ethan gestured to their surroundings. Look where education got us. Luke studied him for a long moment, then reached into his jacket. He slid a folded blueprint across the table. Kane Tower, server room B7. Sometimes, he said quietly, you have to lose the battle to win the war. The apartment was empty when Ethan returned from school. No sign of Zoe or his mother. Just his father at the kitchen table, surrounded by newspaper clippings about Marcus's latest acquisition. Luke didn't look up as Ethan entered. Your mother took Zoe to the bus station. Ethan froze. What? Vegas. Luke's voice was eerily calm. She thinks Marcus's connections will protect her. The air left Ethan's lungs. He'd known Zoe was reckless, but this... A phone buzzed. Luke checked the burner phone Ethan hadn't seen before. His lips curved into something too sharp to be a smile. Pack a bag, he said, standing abruptly. We're taking a trip. Ethan didn't ask where. He already knew. As he zipped his duffel, he glimpsed his father through the cracked bathroom door. Luke stood before the mirror, adjusting a tie Ethan hadn't seen in weeks. For the first time since the fall, Lucas Kane looked like himself again. The police lights came at 3:17 a.m. Ethan woke to pounding on the door, to flashlights cutting through the dark. Two officers stood in the hallway, their expressions grim. Mr. Kane, we need to speak with you about your daughter. Luke was already reaching for his jacket. What happened? The older cop exchanged a glance with his partner. Black Lotus Entertainment was a front. We raided the warehouse tonight. Found, well, let's just say it wasn't modeling. Ethan's blood turned to ice. Luke didn't react. And Zoe? Gone, along with the men running the operation. We think they took the girls to Vegas, but... Luke held up a hand. Give me 24 hours. The cop blinked. Sir, this is a police matter. It's my matter. Luke's voice dropped to something lethal. 24 hours. Something in his tone made the officers step back. They left with warnings, with promises to return. The door clicked shut. Luke turned to Ethan. His eyes were no longer those of a broken man. They burned with cold, calculated fury. Phase 1 is over, he said, pulling a car key from his pocket. Time for Phase 2. As they sped through the night toward Vegas, Ethan finally understood. This had never been about survival. It had always been about vengeance. Part 4. The Reckoning. The desert swallowed the stolen BMW whole. Ethan clung to the passenger seat as his father pushed the car to 110 miles per hour, the Nevada wasteland blurring into streaks of ochre and rust outside the windows. The dashboard clock read 4:47 a.m. Somewhere ahead in the pre-dawn darkness, Zoe was trapped in a blacked-out van with men who thought no one would come looking. You should have told me, Ethan said, his voice raw. Luke's knuckles whitened on the wheel. Told you what? That this was the plan all along. His father didn't answer. The truth hung between them like the pistol digging into Ethan's ribs, a Glock 19. Luke had produced from a duffel bag with the casualness of someone pulling out a spare charger. The burner phone buzzed. Luke thumbed it on speaker. Warehouse secured, Michael's voice crackled. But we've got complications. Marcus sent 3 of his security team as escorts, ex-military. Luke's jaw tightened. Location? Old mining road off Route 95, GPS sending now. A pause. Lucas, they're prepping the girls for transport. You understand what that means. Ethan's vision tunneled. He'd seen enough crime dramas to know what happened to models being prepped in desert warehouses at dawn. Luke accelerated. ETA 20 minutes. The warehouse looked like a rotting tooth against the violet horizon. Ethan crouched beside his father behind a ridge of sun-baked earth, watching through binoculars as 2 armed men paced the perimeter. Their shadows stretched long and grotesque in the rising sun. Change of plan, Luke murmured, stripping off his jacket to reveal a black tactical vest Ethan hadn't noticed before. You're the distraction. Ethan's mouth went dry. What? Luke pressed the Glock into his hand. Safety's off. Don't pull the trigger unless you mean it. Before Ethan could protest, his father was moving, circling toward the warehouse's blind side with the predatory grace of a man who'd done this before. Ethan counted to 30 like he'd been told, then stood and walked straight toward the guards. Hey, his voice cracked. I think my sister's in there. The guards exchanged glances. The taller one smirked, raising his rifle. Kid, you're in the wrong place at the wrong. A gunshot cracked from the roof. The guard dropped. Ethan dove sideways as the second guard spun, firing wildly toward the sound. Another shot, this one from the warehouse side, and the second man collapsed, clutching his knee. Luke emerged from the shadows, smoke curling from his pistol. He stepped over the writhing guard without breaking stride. Stay close, he ordered, kicking open the warehouse door. The stench hit first. Sweat, chemicals, urine. Then the sounds, whimpers, the clink of chains, a man's laughter. Ethan's stomach heaved at the sight. Metal cages lined one wall, each containing a dazed-looking girl no older than Zoe. Near a stained mattress, two men in surgical masks were arguing over a tray of syringes, and in the corner, duct taped to a chair. Zoe! Ethan lunged forward. His sister's head lolled. Her pupils were dilated, her designer dress torn at the shoulder. A trickle of blood ran from her nose. One of the masked men turned. The fuck? Luke shot him in the throat. Chaos erupted. The second man scrambled for a weapon. Ethan barely registered his father's next two shots, only the wet thump of bodies hitting concrete. Check the cages, Luke ordered, already cutting Zoe free. Ethan fumbled with the locks. The girls inside stared at him with hollow eyes. One whispered, Are you angels? A crash from the front entrance. 3 new figures stormed in. Marcus's private security, just as Michael had warned. Luke shoved Zoe into Ethan's arms. Back door, now. But go! Ethan ran, half dragging his sister. The last thing he saw before rounding the corner was his father standing alone against 3 armed men, his posture eerily relaxed. Then the gunfire started. The BMW's tires screamed as Ethan peeled onto Route 95, Zoe convulsing in the back seat. Hold on! He fumbled for his phone with one hand, dialing 911. A bloodied hand grabbed his wrist. Zoe's eyes were wild. No, police! Her words slurred. They own them. Ethan hesitated. In the distance, smoke billowed from the warehouse. No sirens yet. His phone buzzed with an unknown number. He answered. Ethan. His father's voice sent a shock through him. Dad, where? Listen carefully. Luke sounded calm despite the gunfire echoing in the background. There's a private airstrip 10 miles east. Michael will meet you. Ethan's throat tightened. What about you? A pause, then softer. I have unfinished business. The line went dead. Zoe moaned in the back seat. Ethan stomped on the accelerator, watching the sunrise paint the desert in hues of blood and gold. Somewhere behind them, the warehouse burned. The jet was waiting. Michael, Luke's oldest friend and the only executive who hadn't betrayed him, helped load Zoe onto the Gulf Stream. A medic immediately started an IV. Ethan stood on the tarmac, staring at the horizon, waiting. Michael put a hand on his shoulder. We need to go. He's coming back. Ethan, he's coming back. The explosion lit up the western skyline, a fireball so massive it momentarily outshone the sun. Ethan fell to his knees, the heat wave rolling over him like a physical blow. Michael's phone rang. He answered, listened, then went pale. Stock tickers just went crazy. Marcus's entire portfolio, every shell company, every offshore account. It's all being liquidated. Someone just triggered a kill switch on his entire empire. Ethan looked at the burning horizon, understanding dawning. Protocol Phoenix wasn't an escape plan. It was a dead man's switch, and his father had just pulled the trigger. Part 5. The Reckoning. The private hospital smelled like antiseptic and money. Ethan sat by Zoe's bedside watching the cardiac monitor trace steady peaks and valleys. The doctors said she'd survive. The drugs in her system were recreational, not lethal. The bruises around her wrists would fade. The nightmares might not. The door hissed open. Michael entered, his usually impeccable suit wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed. He didn't speak at first, just handed Ethan a tablet displaying live financial news. Kane Innovations Reborn, hostile takeover. Reversed in stunning overnight coup. Ethan scrolled through the headlines. Marcus's accounts frozen, board members arrested. A mysterious transfer of controlling shares to Ethan Kane Minor held in trust. Your father's contingency plans, Michael said quietly. Every piece we lost was rigged to boomerang back. The bankruptcy was a smokescreen. Outside, a helicopter thundered overhead. Zoe stirred but didn't wake. And him? Ethan's voice sounded alien to his own ears. Michael hesitated just a second too long. The warehouse collapse. There were no survivors recovered. Ethan nodded numbly. He'd known before asking. Known from the moment he'd seen that fireball swallow the desert. His father had walked into that warehouse intending to burn it all down. Marcus's empire, his own legacy, everything. Except one thing. Ethan looked down at the documents in his lap. The Kane fortune, intact. The patents, the trademarks, the shell companies within shell companies, all waiting for him. A nurse entered with a vase of white lilies. For the young miss, she murmured. Ethan froze. His father had always sent Zoe lilies on her birthday. As the nurse left, he spotted the envelope tucked among the stems. Inside, a single sheet of paper with 3 handwritten words, "Finish the game." The door burst open. Victoria stood there, her designer dress rumpled, her eyes wild. She took in the monitors, the flowers, the documents in Ethan's hands. "Oh, thank God," she breathed, rushing to Zoe's side. "Baby, Mommy's here." Ethan stood slowly. "Where were you?" Victoria didn't look up from stroking Zoe's hair. "I was getting help. Marcus promised." "Marcus is dead." Ethan's voice cut like glass. Along with 17 of his associates, the warehouse was rigged to blow. Victoria finally met his gaze. For the first time in his life, Ethan saw genuine fear in his mother's eyes. "You knew," he said softly, "about the trafficking, about what Marcus really did." Her silence was answer enough. Ethan picked up the hospital phone. "Security, please." As Victoria screamed protests as Zoe woke groggily to the chaos, Ethan walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over New York's skyline, his skyline now. Somewhere in the desert, ashes swirled over a scorched patch of earth where a father had traded his life for justice. In the reflection of the glass, Ethan saw himself adjust an imaginary tie, the same unconscious gesture his father had always made before battle. The game wasn't finished, but the players had just changed.